Hey everybody, today we're going to be talking about Nephilim Free's new challenge. So, since he could not answer Aaron Ra's challenge, nor my challenge, well, Aaron Ra's the phylogeny challenge, my challenge was to distinguish between a created gene and a mutated gene. Since Nephilim Free could not address either one of those challenges, he has decided to issue a challenge of his own, which we will be debunking today.
Now here's some facts for you about the genetic information that's encoded on DNA that verify for us that all living things are a product of intelligent design, and it is impossible for evolution to be true. The first is this: the linguistics properties of DNA verify that DNA is a product of intelligent sense. Language is a code system employing symbols to represent objects, concepts, or processes.
I'll give you that it's a code, but it is not a code system employing symbols to represent objects, concepts, or processes. Name one object, concept, or process is being represented symbolically by the genetic code. None. The four bases create lots of different codon combinations, and those code for different amino acids. So, at what point are those chemicals just being themselves, representing themselves, and recruiting other chemicals to just do other things? DNA just recruits RNA, similar chemicals. So, at what point are they symbols? What are they symbolizing, Neph? Nothing.
And the application of meaning to and interpretation of meaning from a symbol is a mental process, not a material one.
Sure, but when is the DNA making any application of meaning to or interpreting meaning? None. At no point do chemicals ever have any type of interpretation of what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. Now, you could say that a chemical process has a meaning in the sense of what it does or what it is, but that's not what you're talking about, is it?
Minds impart meaning to matter. Matter does not impart meaning to itself.
Again, other than the self-evident meaning of what it is. A rock is a rock. The meaning of a rock is what it is. Now, we can impart subjective meaning onto things, and I think that's what you're talking about, but there is objective meaning. So I think this is very poorly worded. But let's go on.
The symbolism of language.
So far your first premise is dead wrong. The second one and the third one don't apply to DNA at all. The fourth one
originates with intelligence and cannot be produced by material process.
Is true, but also does not have anything to do with the DNA code or any biology at all. There is no symbolism in biology.
Processes. Now you see, notice I have citations here.
But we can't visit this site because it appears to be a file on your computer or something. I tried to go to this. I had my doubts because it says it's a file on your C drive. So we have no idea what your citations are.
I am the author of all the information in these pages unless specified otherwise. There are quotations, and there's a citation from an information specialist, theorist, named Dr. Werner Gett, but I cite him as the author. Otherwise, all of what you're hearing and seeing here is things, information written by myself.
Congratulations.
The linguistic grammar of genetic information is more complex than most human language grammar.
Okay, so this is just an argument from ignorance. It's so complex that I don't understand it, therefore it must be God. That is a logical fallacy, and you know that. Also, there is no linguistics or grammar in the genetic code whatsoever. I don't know what you're talking about. It's not a language. There aren't sentences. There is no grammar. All you do is you have DNA to RNA to protein, and that's most of it. Then there is some regulatory information. Is that what you're talking about, is grammar? For up and down regulation? Because that's not grammar. That's just a a feedback loop. In which case you could just say two radios next to each other is a language talking in grammar.
I have a citation for that. So I back up what I say.
As far as I can tell, there's no link to this. There are no links to your citations. As far as I can see, you aren't backing up anything you say.
Genetic information possesses the following linguistic features. DNA is a book, encoded or written.
A book. Notice they have to use untechnical language.
With information organized into chapters, which are chromosomes.
No, they are not organized into chapters. You can take a gene from one chromosome and put it into another chromosome. Now, you can't do that with chapters, can you? Chapters have to be read sequentially. Chromosomes do not.
Phrases.
Again, phrases do not have to be... There are some sequences, but they are... they're sequestered in individual genes. I don't know if you understand this. That's why you can take a gene out of one chromosome and put it in another and mix up the chapters that way.
Which are sequences, words which are codons, and letters which are nucleotides, governed by punctuation.
They are not governed by punctuation. A codon can only be 3 letters long. Period. That's not like any other word we know of. Nucleotides are not letters. They combine to make different combinations. If anything, you could say a gene is a word, is more analogous to a word, because they are strings of amino acids. Or a gene or a protein would be a word. I notice protein doesn't work into your language scheme anywhere. But again, this is not information. It's just chemicals making other chemicals. They don't have to be read in a certain grammar. They don't have to be read in a certain way. They don't have to be read in a certain order.
Written language is a code system comprised...
See, there is like a start and stop codon. So is that what you think is a language? The fact that there is a point at which proteins are synthesized and a point at which it cuts off? I don't get you, Neph.
Of arranged symbols, which represent an entity separate from themselves. Punctuation. Written language is a code system comprised of arranged symbols, which represent an entity separate from themselves.
Okay, so this premise is absolutely inapplicable to the genetic code whatsoever. There is no What are the symbols here? Are the nucleotide symbols? Are the codon symbols? What are you saying is a symbol for what? Is a chemical that's stored that can produce a different chemical a symbol for that chemical? No. And they don't have to be arranged in really much specificity whatsoever. And they don't represent an entity separate from themselves.
External to themselves. So, for example, if I write the letters DOG and I'm expressing the concept...
So you're already stepping outside of the genetic framework. Now you're just talking about actual language.
...of a dog. There is no dog in the letters. Those symbols represent something external to the ink on the paper that I put down when I wrote the word dog. That external symbolism is not something that nature can produce. It is impossible. There's no such thing as symbolism in chemistry or physics. At all.
Yeah, you just admitted my point. There is no such thing as symbolism in chemistry and physics at all.
Minds impart meaning to matter. Matter does not impart a meaning to itself. Remember? Go back up here.
So if you make up a word to represent a dog, that's not the same thing as a codon coding for recruiting chemicals that make a different chemical.
The application of meaning to and interpretation of meaning from a symbol is a mental process, not a material one. So Symbolism encoded or written language is an immaterial abstract construct of mind and not comprised of or a property of matter. Genetic information possessed
No. Read that again.
or a property of symbolism encoded or written language is an immaterial abstract construct of mind and not comprised of or a property of matter.
We've discussed this before. All of these immaterial things supposedly are actually encoded in the mind, in matter, which is why when you destroy that matter, you lose that immaterial thought. That's called brain damage. You have no response to that. Again, you're not showing where there's any symbolism or language whatsoever in the gene code. There is the word dog is a symbol for an animal dog. Yes. But guess what? That word is actually stored in your mind in physical matter.
Genetic information possesses the linguistic properties of phonetics, punctuation, syntax, grammar, and semantics.
No, that's just absolutely false. You like to lie a lot. You don't think it's a lie, but it is. Genetic information does not have language, does not have phonetics, I guess it has punctuation because it's but punctuation is not start and stop. That doesn't make punctuation if a process starts and stops. Punctuation is language specific. You still haven't demonstrated that it's a language. You're trying to say that it's a language because it has punctuation when it's actually the other way around. You need to demonstrate that it's a language for it to have punctuation first. It doesn't have syntax, grammar, or semantics. It just has feedback loops.
Citation.
Oh, you point to a citation. Must be true. You didn't show the citation. You just offloaded a bunch of lies.
Genetic instructions in DNA represent linguistics commands to perform the following operations. These are some of the operations provided by the linguistics commands in DNA. To start, in other words, to begin reading a sequence of genetic information at a particular locus. Pause, that is, to temporarily suppress reading the sequence and allow a number of other procedures to take place before continuing. To stop, a command to cease reading a genetic sequence of given information at a given location. More, a command to translate a sequence of information with increased frequency. This is gene expression. Less, a command to translate a sequence of information with reduced frequency. That's gene expression, gene regulation. And ignore, a command to never translate a particular sequence of information.
And that is the extent of the supposed words in your supposed language. And again, you defined words as codons. Most of these are not even codons. So you're all over the place. So starting, pausing, stopping, doing more of, doing less of, or not doing an action is not a language. Those are actions. Those are options. Is a mouse speaking a language if it starts to eat, if it pauses eating, if it stops eating, if it eats more, if it eats less, or if it ignores food? No, it's not. And just because the biological system starts, pauses, stops, does more of, does less of, or ignores certain processes does not mean that's a language. That's just a process. Not all processes are languages. You want to extend, if you want to extend the meaning of language to the genetic code, then you have to extend the meaning of language to any biological process. Any process which starts, pauses, stops, upregulates, downregulates, or ignores input is automatically a language according to you. And that definition is far too broad. I notice you have the definition of language down here. I can barely see it. It's the words, the pronunciation, and methods of combining them used to understand by a community. Now, you cannot communicate and pronounce these things in any biological way. we have to create symbols to talk about them in a language. Okay? That's the symbol. The word codon is a symbol for the chemicals that we're talking about, okay? So, the methods of combining them used and understood by a community. There's not really any way to combine these. These are separate processes. You can string them together in a sequence, but they don't impart any meaning. It just stops a process. That is not communicating information, Neph. You are full of shit.
These are some of the commands that are linguistic. They're found.
They're not linguistic. If you want those to be linguistic, anything can be linguistic now. That's the problem.
In the genetic information. Now, here are some of my sources for the information.
Oh, finally.
Now we'll get to the heart of the problem for the evolutionist. What is information? How do we know that DNA possesses something that nature cannot produce?
I've already proven most of your premises wrong or inapplicable, so I don't... I'm only saying that out of sheer curiosity at this point.
Give me one moment, and I'll go through this with you.
Oh, God.
All right, so let's examine the claim. DNA is a product of material, chemical processes with no evidence of being intelligently designed. That's what the evolutionists would have us believe.
That's the truth. You have not presented evidence of intelligent design.
The response to this, the proper response is this. The DNA molecule is a physical medium encoded with information which prescribes organisms.
Some people would quibble on the definition of information. I won't here. I don't think it matters.
The properties of information verify that all organisms are a product of intelligent design since
the difference here would be information, objective information versus subjective information, and I think he's going to conflate the two, because you can get objective information from anything. Everything contains objective information. The problem is Neph is going to say interpretations of information is information. That's subjective information, what you glean from the information, how a mind processes information.
Information is a non-material fundamental entity and cannot be produced by material processes.
Wrong. Everything has information. So, unless you're comfortable using this analogy for a grain of sand, then you should stop talking about information right now, because a grain of sand contains information. So you should be able to take a grain of sand and demonstrate God's existence from its complexity, if information is all that it takes.
And information is a product of intelligence.
No, it's not. I've just demonstrated this. And so, the way you're using information, there is no information in the gene code, if that's the case. Because what you're saying is that information is subjective information, information that is the product of intelligence. That's not the kind of information that's in the genetic code. It's not symbolic. It just creates other chemicals. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't stick around. So we only see the ones that work. It's not that complicated. So, since Neph is off on completely the wrong foot, this is just where it needs to stop. He's just full of crap. Everything he argues is absurd and can be taken to the most absurd extreme because it's so vague and so inclusive. So if you want information in the genetic code, that means a piece of sand has information. Okay? So, I hope that answers your challenge. I have just debunked it thoroughly. I know you ran away from me last time when you admitted evolution, but I'm going to continue to go after you. Maybe we can have a conversation again about this.